Okay, so again, we're going to be talking about factoring these x-intercepts, and we're actually going to do the exact same method. Again, if you try to solve this by the normal way of trying to add 4 over and divide by 4, you're just going to get a mess. So we really do need to factor this. I'm just doing this case so that we can kind of remember how to factor some of the harder things. So here's how we factor stuff that has an a term out in front. We're going to kind of use the guess and check method. So we're going to think about what will multiply together to give me 15. So I'm going to start with 5 and 3. And then what will multiply together to give me 4. So I'm just going to try -2 and +2 and see if that will work. And this time I do have to check because I don't know if I'm going to get my middle term or not. So we'll just multiply it out and see. So if I do this, I should get 15x squared plus 10x minus 6x minus 4. When I add these two middle terms together, I end up with getting 4x. So that worked out for me. So it really is, so these terms right here really are the factors of that. So that is what we really want to use. So we're going to use those as I erase all this stuff because I'll need the room. But again, on these things you have to check every single time. We just got lucky and got on our first try. But it's kind of like guess and check until you get it. Okay, so now that we found the right ones, again, either this term or this term has to be 0. So either 5x minus 2 equals 0, or 3x plus 2 equals 0. So then we just kind of solve through. So add 2 to both sides here. In this case, subtract 2 to both sides. I'd get 5x equals 2. I'd get 3x equals 2. And this would just, when I divide by 3, I would just end up with getting x equals 2 over 3. And in this case, when I divide by 5, I would end up getting that x equals 2 over 5. And those would be my two answers right there. X equals 2 over 5 and x equals 2 over 3. Now in today's activity, we'll just divide those things and round to the nearest tenth and just get the nicest decimal that we can. But that's kind of our goal there, is just divide by the things and try to get the nicest decimal you can. Let's do a second one of these. So again, when I'm looking at this, I'm going to think about what can multiply to give me that. So we're going to factor again. And I'm going to just choose 7x and 5x. Then I'm going to think what will multiply together to give me 3. And we'll just choose plus 3 and plus 1 and just see how this goes. So I do 7 times 5, which would give me 35x squared. 7 times 1, which would give me 7x. 3 times 5, which will give me 15x. And plus 1. And then again, when I add these terms together, I should get 22. And again, we got lucky that the first time we picked the right combo, or I picked the right combo. But again, most times you do have to check. So make sure that you go through, check, and make sure that you do get this right combo, because you won't always guess that it should be 7x, 5x, 3, and 1. The more practice, again, the better you get at it, but you really do need to check them each time. Okay, so now that we have those, again, two things that multiply together to give you 0. One or both have to be equal to 0, so we're going to set both equal to 0. So this one or this one is equal to 0. And again, we'll solve through, so minus 3. So 7x is equal to 3. So when you divide by 7 on both sides, you should get that x is equal to 3 over 7. And and that's one of my answers. We'll solve this side, so subtract 1. Get 5x equals -1. Divide by 5, and x equals -1. Whoops, can't write. -1/5. So again, for these examples, you just factor like we did before. You're going to set them both equal to 0, and then you're going to solve. And a lot of times when you have an a term out in front, your x-intercepts are not whole numbers, which would make our old method of graphing really, really tough. Let's look at a couple other different kinds of factors. So another different kind of factors is stuff that doesn't have a b term. And if you remember thinking about what would multiply together to give you this, it should be conjugates. So we should instantly be thinking, oh, these have to be conjugates. Well, what multiplies together to give you k? K times k. Well, multiplies together to give you -121. Well, -11 and +11. And these things are conjugates because they're the same in opposites. So if you check that out and you multiply everything, you will see that the middle terms cancel. But this works very, very nicely. And again, one or both have to be equals to 0, so k minus 11 has to equal 0, or k plus 11 has to equal 0, which means that k equals 11, or k equals -11. Let's try one more of these things without a b term. So again, in this example, since it doesn't have a b term, we're going to set this up, and we're going to go, okay, what multiplies together to give me n? Well, n and n. What's going to give me -64? Well, -8 and +8. And we'll multiply this out just to check. So n squared, yep. +8, -8, things will cancel in the middle. -64, so we're all good. So when you multiply these two things together, you want them to equal 0. So either one or both. So again, we just set them both to 0. So this would be n equals 8, and this would be n equals -8. And those would be my two answers. Most times when you factor these things, you should get two answers. Please set both to equal 0, and that's kind of the method we go through.